Hello and welcome, dear students. Today we will be talking about nature of hydrograph and its influencing factors. The term hydrograph is a graphical tool used in hydrology that represents the temporal changes in water discharge or flow rate within a river, stream or drainage basin over a time in chart waveform, where the y-axis represents the discharge or flow rate of water, that is largely calculated in cubic meters per second, and x-axis which represents time spanning in minutes, hours, days or even longer duration depending upon the purpose. It is used to analyze the hydrological response of a watershed or catchment to precipitation events or other contributing factors like snowmelt, reservoir releases or groundwater flow. These graphs help visualize peak flows, time to reach peak discharges after a rain event, recession periods and recovery back to base flow levels. The nature of any hydrograph is shaped by several interacting factors, which includes rainfall properties, watershed characteristics and land use patterns. Now let us discuss first about the characteristics of an hydrograph. A hydrograph generally comprises of the different phases. Peak discharge. This is the highest point on the hydrograph, indicating the maximum flow rate during the event. The peak discharge, which shows the maximum capacity of runoff within the given event. The peak discharge is also affected by rainfall, duration, intensity, spatial distribution and watershed storage characteristics, and is crucial for flood risk assessment and infrastructural design. Next is the recession limb, which is also called falling limb. It represents the decline in discharge once precipitation stops and shows the decrease in water discharge as the runoff declines and the water returns to previous conditions. Recession limb is controlled by groundwater contribution and system drainage, its characteristics and its length and shape, which are influenced by soil permeability, basin storage capacity, vegetation and drainage efficiency. Next is the base flow. The water contributed by groundwater discharge into the stream or natural subsurface flow when no significant rainfall is occurring and is depicted as the sustained flow in the hydrograph. It helps maintain a minimum discharge levels between precipitation events and thus reflecting the capacity of the basin to store and release water gradually. So far as the storm or direct runoff is concerned, the portion of discharge directly resulting from the precipitation events excluding the base flow contributions. So far as the lag time in the hydrograph is concerned, the time delay between the peak of the rainfall and the peak discharge, which indicates runoff generation efficiency and watershed response time. Now let us focus on the types of hydrograph and their nature. Hydrographs show the relationship between discharge, or we can say that flow rate, in a river, stream or watershed and time, and serve as a critical tool for hydrologists in analyzing watershed behavior, forecasting floods and designing water management systems. There are various types of hydrographs categorized based on the characteristics and uses. The first is the single peak hydrograph. This type of hydrograph is characterized by a single peak followed by a gradual recession and is common in small catchment or for isolated rainfall events. This type of hydrograph is typically observed for isolated storm events where runoff concentrates and flows through a watershed relatively quickly. It is typically used to analyze the response of small watersheds and urban catchments to discrete rainfall events. The second type of hydrograph is multiple peak hydrograph. This is a type of hydrograph in which each peak corresponds to runoff from a specific rainfall event or sub-catchment contribution and is commonly associated with large basins and the rainfall events involving multiple rainfall periods. These hydrographs exhibit multiple peaks corresponding to successive rainfall events or varying contributions from different subbasins. Third type of hydrograph is storm hydrograph. It is the type of hydrograph that distinguishes between base flow and storm flow. It is useful for understanding watershed responses to rainfall events. Their components include the base flow, depicting the pre-existing groundwater discharge prior to the runoff response, and storm flow, that is direct runoff from a single rainfall event, which shows the contribution from rainfall that generates. The fourth type of hydrograph is unit hydrograph. A unit hydrograph illustrates the discharge resulting from a unit of effective rainfall, which can be 1 mm or 1 inch, spread uniformly over a watershed. Unit hydrograph is used in hydrological modeling to estimate runoff for various rainfall intensities and durations. The fifth type of hydrograph is synthetic hydrograph. Synthetic hydrographs are computational models developed to simulate flow responses for theoretical rainfall events or basins lacking observational data. This type of hydrograph is used in planning, design, and real-time decision making, especially in ungauged basins. The sixth type of hydrograph is flash flood hydrograph. These hydrographs represent discharge during flood events caused by intense or prolonged precipitation, snow melt, or dam breaks. Flood hydrographs are characterized by sharp rising limb, high peaks, and rapid recessions, reflecting the sudden concentration of runoff with short lag times. It is generated in small, impervious, or steep basins, often as a result of intense rainfall. It is crucial for flood risk assessment and designing infrastructure like flood control reservoirs or levees. The seventh type of hydrograph is base flow hydrograph. These hydrographs focus on groundwater discharge over time, reflecting the base flow contribution to river systems, and exhibit a more gradual, consistent slope and overall lower drainage levels. These type of hydrographs are important in karst hydrogeology, that is limestone dominated rocks, aquifer management, and long-term water resource assessments. The eighth type of hydrograph is continuous or long-term hydrographs. These show flow over extended periods, integrating storm flow, base flow, and seasonal change. They highlight cyclic behaviors such as wet and dry seasons or trends related to watershed changes, for example, urbanization, and are useful in monitoring hydrological regimes and identifying long-term trends like climate change impacts or groundwater depletion. The ninth type of hydrograph is dam break hydrographs. These type of hydrographs are produced by sudden release of water due to structural failures in dams or reservoirs. These hydrographs display extreme abrupt peak flow followed by steep recession, representing rapid water release and subsequent drainage. They are very critical for risk management and emergency planning in flood-prone areas downstream of a reservoir. Now let's have a look on some of the factors which influence the shape of a hydrograph. The shape of a hydrograph is influenced by various interrelated factors that arise from both physical characteristics of a watershed and the meteorological conditions during a precipitation event. Understanding the factors influencing the hydrograph shapes enables hydrologists to better predict runoff responses, assess flood risks, and design effective water resource management strategies. So, this comprehensive approach is crucial for addressing challenges related to urbanization, climate change, natural disasters like floods. Now, if we just see the meteorological factors, rainfall intensity and duration, intense rainfall produces a steep rising limb in the hydrograph with higher peak discharge as more water enters the stream system in a very short time. Longer rainfall events results in sustained runoff extending in the hydrograph falling limb. So far as the rainfall distribution is concerned, the spatially uniform rainfall across the watersheds leads to a symmetrical peak in the hydrograph, whereas the non-uniform distribution with concentrated rainfall in one part of the catchment generates an asymmetric shape and localized runoff peaks. If we see the rainfall type affects the hydrograph. For example, convective storms often produce short but intense rainfall, resulting in sharp hydrograph peaks. On the other hand, frontal or cyclonic rainfall involves prolonged moderate precipitation, causing broad hydrograph peaks. If we just see the precipitation phases and their impacts, rainfall leads to immediate runoff, whereas snowfall contributes to delayed runoff due to a lag in snow melt. This delay modifies the hydrograph by reducing the peak and extending the runoff period. Now, if we just move to the physiographic factors of the catchment and their influence on the watershed, catchment size, large catchments generally experience delayed and attenuated peak flows because water takes longer to travel to the basin outlet. In contrast, small catchments respond quickly, producing sharper peaks and shorter hydrograph durations. So far as the catchment shape is concerned, the circular watersheds show faster and more concentrated runoff, leading to sharper hydrographs, while as the elongated watersheds have more distributed flow, causing flatter hydrographs. Now, we will discuss about the topography and its influence on the hydrological behavior or the hydrograph behavior. The steep slope contributes to a rapid surface runoff, sharply rising limbs and high peak flows, while as the gentle slope allows more infiltration and slower runoff, resulting in broader and flatter hydrograph. Now, an important influencing factor, that is the drainage pattern. Dendritic drainage system evenly distribute runoff and produce broader hydrograph peaks. On the other hand, parallel drainage systems often direct flow efficiently to main channels, creating sharper peaks. Now, let us move to one of the important influencing factor, that is soil and land cover characteristics. Now, first we will discuss about the soil type. Often permeable soils, for example sandy or loamy soils, promote infiltration, reducing the intensity of runoff and creating a flatter hydrograph with a prolonged recession limb. Impermeable or clay soils resist infiltration, leading to rapid surface runoff and sharp hydrograph peaks. If we see the land use and vegetation, agriculture land, urban areas or other regions with impervious surface generate more storm flow due to reduced infiltration, resulting in shorter lag times and higher peak discharge. Dense vegetation, on the other hand, intercepts rainfall, enhances infiltration and slows down surface runoff, creating a flatter hydrograph. So far as the moisture content is concerned, in antecedent conditions, wet or saturated soils generate quick and significant runoff with high peak discharges. Dry soils absorb more water initially, delaying runoff and reducing peak flow. Now, so far as the hydrological factors are concerned, base flow contribution is a prominent one. A high base flow, that is the pre-existing sustained flow from groundwater discharge, adds to the overall flow in the stream, raising the base of the hydrograph. Low base flow results in a greater relative impact of the storm event on peak discharge. So far as the storage effects are concerned, watershed features such as wetlands, ponds or reservoir temporarily store water and release it gradually, attenuating the hydrograph and reducing sharp peaks. So far as channel characteristics are concerned, wider or deeper channels can accommodate greater flow volumes, reducing peak discharge, while narrow channel can amplify peak flows. Vegetation or rough channel beds slow water movement, broadening the hydrograph, whereas smooth and straight channels lead to faster runoff and steeper rising and falling limbs. If we see the impact of stream network structure, a dense and well-developed drainage network drains water rapidly, reducing lag time and increasing peak flow compared to sparse network, which cause slower responses. Now, if we see the impacts of human activities, urbanization comes the first. Urban areas with impervious surfaces, for example, roads, buildings, which prevent infiltration and increase surface runoff, resulting in shorter lag times, higher peaks and sharp hydrograph shapes. So, under human impacts, deforestation in agriculture is one of the important impacts. So far as this impact is concerned, removal of vegetation reduces soil absorption and interception, accelerating runoff and producing steeper rising limbs. Agricultural activity can compact the soil, decreasing infiltration and increasing surface runoff rates. So far as the impacts by reservoirs and dams is concerned, reservoirs store flood waters and smooth out hydrograph fluctuations, reducing downstream peaks and elongating recession periods, particularly during controlled releases. If we see the impacts of the soil conservation measures, contour forming terracing and construction of retention basins slow runoff yielding flatter hydrographs with reduced peak flow magnitudes. Now, if we see the climatic factors, seasonality is one of the important climatic factors. Seasonal variation in rainfall and temperature affect the volume and timing of runoff. For example, snow melt in spring creates delayed hydrograph responses, while as monsoon seasons may result in rapid and intense runoff. Climate change is also one of the important impact. Climate change in precipitation, intensity, frequency and patterns due to global warming are likely to produce more extreme hydrographs with sharper peaks and prolonged recession limbs. Now, let us discuss about the rainfall influencing the hydrograph. Rainfall intensity significantly influences the shape of a hydrograph and subsequently affects key parameters like peak discharge, lag time, rising limb, steepness and runoff duration. Impact of rainfall intensity on hydrograph components. Under these components, a rising limb, high intensity rainfall leads to a steep and rapid rising limbs as a large volume of water reaches the river or stream in a very shorter period of time. In contrast, low intensity rainfall causes a gentler slope with water entering the system more gradually. So far as the peak discharges are concerned, rainfall with higher intensity generates higher peak discharge since the rate of input exceeds infiltration capacity and channel capacity, resulting in more direct surface runoff. This peak could be several times higher than that triggered by the moderate or low intensity rainfall, particularly in impervious or urbanized areas where infiltration is limited. If we just see the lag time is the duration between the onset of the rainfall and the hydrograph peak, which decreases with the higher intensity rainfall because water saturates soils faster and runs off more quickly to the streams or rivers. Conversely, low intensity rainfall often infiltrates soil more efficiently, delaying runoff and increasing lag time. So far as the recession limb is concerned, high intensity rainfall is often associated with a shorter recession limb as the rapid influx of water subsides relatively quickly once the rainfall event ends. On the other hand, low intensity rainfall tends to produce a longer recession limb as water infiltrates the soil and base flow contributions sustain the flow for extended periods. Now, let us see the impacts of rainfall on the base flow versus storm flow. For intense storms, a much higher proportion of the hydrograph consists of storm flow, that is the direct runoff generated by the precipitation, reducing the relative contribution of base flow. In contrast, low intensity rainfall allows base flow to dominate, resulting in a more gradual overall response. Now, let us discuss about the variability of hydrographs under distinct hydrological and climatic contexts. Under that, let us see that tropical climate conditions. These regions are characterized by high rainfall intensity, often associated with short and intense storm events. For example, monsoon regions. They produce periodic but extreme runoff contributions during wet seasons. The shape of the hydrograph depicts the sharp rising limbs due to the intense precipitation and high runoff generation. High and narrow peaks indicating concentrated runoff over short periods. Steep recession limbs as infiltration and storage capacities are often overwhelmed by heavy rainfall. The influencing factors such as soil saturation in wet seasons amplify the runoff and the vegetation density that can buffer the flood hydrograph during the initial stage of the wet season, but may overwhelm during prolonged rainfall. So far as the arid and semi-arid conditions are concerned, these regions are characterized by low annual precipitation with occasional high intensity rainfall, often in the form of flash floods. High evaporation rates reduces base flow contributions. So, the hydrograph shape is extremely sharp and high and short-lived peaks as impervious or compacted soils. For example, clays or rocky terrains prevent the infiltration. For example, the flash flood events in desert regions such as Sahara or southwestern United States are characterized by highly responsive storm hydrographs. Factors influencing variability include the lack of vegetation, which exacerbates runoff generation, and dry soil conditions may initially absorb rainfall but becoming rapidly saturated during intense events. Now, if we just see the temperate climate, these temperate climatic regions are characterized by moderate rainfall distributed throughout the year with seasonal peaks, for example, spring snowmelt or autumn storms. Diverse land use and vegetation cover influence the runoff and base flow contribution in these type of climates. Hydrograph shape in temperate climate regions is characterized by gradual rising limbs due to moderate rainfall intensity and higher proportion of infiltration and groundwater recharge. Factors influencing variability include snowmelt runoff dynamics in spring create unique hydrograph shapes with extended peaks, and seasonal variations in vegetation cover impacts infiltration rates and runoff generation. So far as the cold climate and snow dominated regions are concerned, these regions have dominance of snow and ice storage with limited runoff during winter and large release during melting seasons. Hydrograph shape depicts the flat or negligible discharge during cold months due to precipitation being stored as snow. Examples include Arctic and alpine regions, which experience hydrographs with delayed peaks, such as those observed in the Himalayas or rocky snow-fed rivers. Now, so far as the urbanized watersheds are concerned, these are characteristics of cities where we have anthropogenically altered hydrology due to the impervious surface, efficient drainage systems and limited infiltration. Bored hydrographs with exaggerated discharge peaks and shortened lag times are characteristics of these hydrographs. The shape is depicted by sharp, narrow and high peaks following rainfall events due to rapid runoff. These areas have minimal base flow contributions as urban areas lack natural infiltration and recharge. So, there is quick recession limbs due to the absence of natural storage features. Example includes highly developed cities, for example New York, Tokyo, often implement stormwater management system to mitigate the impact of urban runoff on receiving water bodies. So far as the forested watersheds are concerned, these regions are characterized by dense vegetation and permeable soils, promote interception, infiltration and evapotranspiration, significantly moderating runoff. Hydrograph's shape is depicted by suppressed peak discharges with gradual rising limbs and extended recession limbs due to the delayed flow contribution from intercepted and infiltrated water. For example, watersheds in undistributed rainforests or boreal forests exhibit hydrographs with stable low discharge. The seasonal changes in leaf cover, soil moisture conditions and forest management practices can modify runoff behavior and hydrograph attributes. So far as the coastal regions are concerned, these regions are characterized by extreme precipitation during cyclones, hurricanes or monsoons and high water tables and limited infiltration capacity which can amplify runoff. Hydrograph shape shows the fast and high runoff response to tropical storms or tidal influences, short-lived peaks with the rapid recession due to shallow soil layers and saturated conditions. For example, coastal regions impacted by monsoons, that is in South Asia, or hurricanes, for example in Gulf Coast or USA, see acute hydrograph responses during storm events. Now, if we just have a look on the wetlands or the peatlands, these regions are characterized by high soil storage capacities and dense vegetation cover. Water flow and discharge are buffered by slow release from saturated soils. Hydrograph shape shows a flattened peak and prolonged recession phase due to the high water retention capacity of wetland soils. Discharge is steady with minimal fluctuations between storm events. For example, the hydrograph of the marshlands or bog ecosystems show subdued responses during rainfall events, preventing flash flood conditions. Lastly, if we just see the karst topography and groundwater dominated basins, these regions are characterized by quick transport of water through subterranean channels, delayed but sustained groundwater contributions to discharge. Hydrograph shape may show dual peaks, one for the quick surface runoff and another resulting from delayed contributions, also longer recession limbs due to the groundwater release. Example includes the Mediterranean karst regions that exhibit complex hydrographs influenced by both surface and subsurface hydrological dynamics. This was all about today's lecture. Hope you have enjoyed it well. Thank you for watching.